Good morning or good afternoon, depending on wherever you are in the country. And we are in at least 3 separate time zones here today. My name is Drew Clark. I am the editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. I am very, very happy to be with you for this special Broadband Breakfast live online event, a call for a digital equity bill of rights. And I've got 2 wonderful guests that will be speaking with us momentarily. I wanted to just give a quick introduction for the background, right? I'm in Keystone, Colorado at Mountain Connect, which is a very, very good broadband conference that I've been participating in the last 2 days. Normally, of course, I'm based in Washington, D.C., where Broadband Breakfast, a news and events company focused on better broadband, better lives, is based. We publish stories every day, every business day, about the happenings around politics and technology and how it impacts better broadband, better lives, how we get that higher capacity broadband throughout the country to everyone, and make sure they have the tools that they need to use it and to make best use of it. The guests that I have here today will talk about the broadband infrastructure package that took place, that was passed on by the Senate, or it was passed by the Senate yesterday. We're going to hear a little bit about that and its significance, not only infrastructure, but also adoption and usage and equity for broadband. So with that, let me go ahead and open up to our panelists. We seem to have lost, unfortunately, one of our panelists. Hopefully she will join back momentarily. There she is. We have with us here today Sunne Wright McPeak, who is the president and CEO of the California Emerging Technology Fund and has been spearheading an effort to get a national digital equity bill of rights. Also with me here today, and we very much appreciate her extra effort to be with us this morning, even as she is at an airport and will only be with us for the first half hour, Joy Cheney, who is the Senior Vice President for Policy and the Executive Director of the National Urban League's Washington Bureau. So Sunne, let me turn to you to set this discussion up, and then we'll hear first from Joy and then a little more from Sunne. So go ahead, Sunne.
Thank you, Drew. And what a pleasure it is to join you again for Broadband Breakfast and Broadband Lunch and Broadband Brunch for everybody across the country. We have so appreciated your continuing leadership, Drew, and your focus with this broadcast program on how to achieve digital equity. I love your slogan, better broadband, better lives. It really sums it up. And this is an important pivotal moment for the nation. As you have talked with us before, the California Emerging Technology Fund has long called digital access a 21st century civil right. We know the challenges to overcoming the digital divide means overcoming poverty, which is rooted in systemic racism. So it is a much more complex issue than just the deployment and adoption of digital technology. However, we need to seize this moment in the nation in order to get the best return on investment and actually help tackle that wall of poverty. That is why the California Emerging Technology Fund launched the Digital Equity Bill of Rights. I should hasten to say that actually it was first brought to our attention by the California Public Utilities Commissioner, Martha Guzman Aceves, and we have thought it was a brilliant idea. Our board of directors said, let's go forward and advance the Digital Equity Bill of Rights as an overarching call to action for investment in technology and also getting everybody online. That is what we've done. I am very pleased to report that our board took that step even before we had a new president and having Congress member Clyburn's vision being realized. We also are very pleased that we have board members. Our chair, Barbara O'Connor, is listening today, several allies that work with us. But in California, all 3 chapters of the Urban League have signed on to the Digital Equity Bill of Rights. And that gives me great pleasure to be able to share this, this platform, this podium with Joy Cheney. And she's going to give us the up-to-date view from DC and how we work together. So Drew, back to you. And I just am so honored to share this conversation with Joy.
Well, take it away, Joy. I look forward to hearing your report, and then we'll open it up a little more broadly. Okay, go ahead, Joy.
Oh, thank you all so much. First of all, I hope that it's not too loud in the background. I'm doing my best. Drew and Sunne, thank you so much for inviting me and the National Urban League. Let me just say it has been a busy couple of months for those of us who have been fighting for broadband equity and really a closing of the digital divide. And we're thrilled about that. But I hope that we all have a moment to breathe for a second before we go back into it and begin the rest. What happened overnight, so while you were sleeping, is that the Senate passed the bipartisan infrastructure package earlier yesterday, and then passed the budget reconciliation bill. And in the first part, the bipartisan infrastructure package, they were able to put in about $65 billion for infrastructure around internet and infrastructure around broadband. So that was expanding availability, and then about 14 billion of that 65 was towards affordability. And then there was about a 2.75 or so billion that was for the Digital Equity Act, the Digital Equity Act. So in total, a good amount, not the amount perhaps that many of us had envisioned, but in that 14 billion, it includes an expansion of the emergency broadband benefit. It calls it a new name. If I went to grab the name, then it would knock me off video, so I won't do that. But it's a new name for the program, affordable something or another. But it's basically a revamped version of the emergency broadband benefit. Put some strengthening in there, ensures that the plans that are participating have some consumer protections. And then on the availability piece, on the build out piece, the larger part of the money, there are some things in there about speed, and as well as trying to address digital redlining, right? So making sure that we're not just putting all our money towards, rural America where there was no broadband, which is important, right? We want to make sure we address rural America, but we also acknowledge that there are parts of urban America through digital redlining that have been carved out. So there's good pieces in there. People can argue about wishing there was more in any one section, but we feel pretty good about where it is and believe it's a platform for us being able to build going forward. And there does seem to be, I will tell you, when I began, when we kind of began to push in the beginning of the spring, end of winter, it wasn't universally accepted that we needed to address affordability and availability. And as well as utilization. It was not universally accepted. The focus was almost on the household adage that, you have to have focus on build out. But towards the end, it was absolutely clear on a bipartisan level that you needed to have both addressed, because the vast majority of people who do not have broadband don't have it because they can't afford it, or they have some, they don't know how to get on it. So that has just been a real marketed shift towards inclusion and equity and closing the digital divide, and we're thrilled about it. And before I stop, because I know I'm going on a little long, let me just say that the way that the Urban League has approached it is through our Lewis Latimer plan for digital equity and inclusion. We launched that plan, or released it originally in January, pre-launch, and then a full launch in March. And the plan tackles 4 things: availability. We know that people all over the country need broadband. And that rural America is not monolithically white. There are many people of color, and James Clyburn, of course, acknowledged that in his work. So it was important to tackle availability, but then we needed to attack affordability. We needed to address it in adoption, and that includes making sure people are able to get online. The third piece that I think gets less attention, Drew alluded to it, I did earlier as well, is the utilization, making sure that the government improves its usage of the internet for delivering and deploying essential services. And that, of course, would disproportionately benefit those people who interact with the government most for essential services, underserved communities, communities of color. And then fourth, and this is very important because we are the Urban League, and I know you all know as well, making sure that we are closing any gaps for economic opportunity for communities of color. That last piece is so important. We want to make sure communities of color are benefiting from any monies that are spent in this infrastructure package, in particular on build out. We want to make from ownership to the boardroom, to the supply chain, to the front line. We don't want on the end of this to just have broadband. That would be great. We want that. But we also want to make sure that this is an opportunity for wealth creation for minority-owned businesses and communities of color. So we are, very excited about, the possibility to make some, as we go forward, to get some assurances that there will be emphasis placed on making sure this is an equitable distribution of wealth. So there you have it. Lots has been going on in Washington, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Well, please stay with us as long as you can as we have the continuing discussion here. Sunne, I know you've got more to say, and you will always have more to say, as I know. But I do want to just say a few quick words, if I could, prompted in some measure by what Joy said. Oh, and hopefully, Joy, you're still with us here, even though you've popped off the screen. I had the opportunity to work in the state of Illinois for several years. Sunne was a guest on this show a year ago, and that was actually kind of a thing we talked quite a bit about, my work in Illinois with the Partnership for a Connected Illinois. And I had the privilege of working with the now late Charles Benton, of course, the founder and namesake of the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society. And one of the things that I think I gained from my experience working with Charles was the real important role of the better lives, right? I mean, kind of the notion of better broadband, better lives probably has its origin in some of the thinking that I absorbed from him, because the Benton, then it was the Benton Foundation. Benton Foundation created a you could probably call it a pre-plan for the National Broadband Plan of 2010. Back in 2008, before the 2008 election, the Benton Foundation put out a report highlighting the national purposes, the role of broadband, and that translated into the National Broadband Plan. We needed better broadband. Why did we need better broadband? We needed it to have these kinds of economic opportunities, distance learning, remote education, being able to allow people to obtain government services and handle civic matters, the engagement component. So some of these things that we now use different labels, like digital inclusion was a new label back then, right? And now we're talking, of course, about digital equity and digital inclusion. So I just wanted to say that piece about it's so important. And yes, maybe sometimes we lose track of the impact piece while we start to go, okay, well, how are we going to get fiber to the neighborhoods, or how are we going to get some higher capacity broadband to rural communities? These are all vital, and of course we care about the broadband infrastructure. But I'm so pleased that on the day after, or the day of the passage of this, we're talking precisely about the digital equity piece. So with that bit of an interlude, let me turn it back to you, Sunne, to give us a little more background on CETF and your role and this push for a national digital equity bill of rights.
Thank you, Drew. And I would always defer to you and listen to your passion I am so excited that you scheduled this meeting fortuitously at this moment, and that Joy was willing to, in an airport, join us and provide all of those details. The California Emerging Technology Fund is a very unusual, somewhat unique organization in the nation. The California Public Utilities Commission directed the establishment of the California Emerging Technology Fund as a public benefit out of mergers in 2005. In 2005, SBC bought AT&T, kept the name AT&T, and Verizon bought MCI. Our Public Utilities Commission thought it was time that there needed to be a nonprofit statewide entity, mission-driven, to close the digital divide. So it was their idea. They conceived of this organization, specified in the order the dollars that would be seed capital from those two successor companies out of a corporate consolidation, and also delineated the first board of directors. Now that's 14 years ago that we stood up CETF. When we began, the FCC was defining broadband as 256 kilobits in one direction, and advanced communications if it was in two. The world has changed, and anyone who is not connected to the internet is not only digitally disadvantaged, they are economically disadvantaged. And that is why I think this convergence of the conversation around the technology is necessary, but not sufficient. There has to be an extraordinary effort to overcome what is in the bill called digital disadvantaged communities, so disparities and discrimination. We need to really understand that the digital divide is another manifestation of the economic divide and the opportunity divide. And so from the very beginning, the California Emerging Technology Fund identified these rather systemic and interrelated forces that have to be addressed in order to achieve the goal of getting everybody online. Our senior vice president, Susan Walters, has been the champion and the leader for CETF of not only getting everybody connected with grants that we provide to community organizations to be the trusted messengers in reaching out to the communities that we're focusing on, which are low-income communities, communities of color, people with disabilities, rural, remote, and in California, we've got the most diverse geography of any state, and 109 federally recognized tribes. More Native Americans live in California than any other state. And so we have always had this lens of inclusion and equity. And it was in that vein that Susan has also led our Digital Equity Bill of Rights and has gathered more than 2,000 signatures. At this point, we hope it will continue because, as you heard Joy say, as you have laid out, Drew, and at this time in which the federal government in California, our governor and legislature just approved $6 billion investment in infrastructure, we have to ensure that that is empowering the communities that have historically been overlooked. And so it is also, I think, important, Drew, that we talk about, as Joy said, there is a successor program in the new bill, the Affordable Connectivity Program, to take the place of EBB, the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. That means we also are addressing affordability, that hurdle of the cost, why low-income households have not been online. I want to also just say, when we were talking a year ago, we were in the middle of shelter in place, the consequences of the pandemic, and we were all told stay at home. There were a lot of essential workers who did not have the ability to stay home and still earn a living. But that experience of sending all students home and trying now to do distance learning, trying to provide services that are from your doctor or your healthcare provider online, that exposed a twin pandemic. Not only were we trying to cope with COVID-19, but we saw that we had this pandemic of what we call institutionalized, concentrated, persistent poverty rooted in systemic racism that also was the other absolute, insidious disease that had to be tackled. I want to salute the National Urban League and your plan. It was actually very interesting when we had a conversation on the quest for digital equity with Mignon Clyburn and Michelle Chong, two pioneering women on the FCC, 2 different decades, 2 different parties, I might say, but who both come from a perspective of it is time, and it is time to tackle all of those inequities, and we have to do that with digital inclusion. So that I just wanted to share that perspective, and now go back to Joy before she has to leave us to maybe comment.
Yes, I thank you, Sunny, for your remarks. I agree with all of them. Let me just add one other thing. This is just for our awareness. I forgot to say it earlier. On the new benefit plan, the new iteration of it, it's going to provide $30 per month. I want to make sure that we capture that, because in the previous past, I think it's $50 for the EBB. It will be $30, and we think that that's probably a good number. Right. And so one of the things about the EBB is it taught us, right, what works, what doesn't work. I know that there have been some conversations about a sliding scale, whatnot. $30, it kind of was a good central figure. The other thing I'd like to say about our Latimer plan, Drew brought up the National Broadband Plan. Blair Levin, who is a great friend, was the lead author on our Lewis Latimer plan, and the executive director of our Latimer plan was Edward Smith, who is also no stranger in these rooms. So we definitely went back to the experts to put this together to make sure that we had really left no stone unturned. And it's a real comprehensive view. Now it's dense, it's 200 pages, but in some respects, it's an encyclopedia of solutions and recommendations that we can go to. And as we turn the page, first of all, let's just be clear, this bill it's passed one house. It has to then go to the House of Representatives. I think most of you all hopefully saw that Steny Hoyer is going to bring back the House, Nancy Pelosi rather, it's going to bring back the House on August 23rd for an unusual August work period. And according to their statement, they're going to address both infrastructure packages as well as John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So Urban League is having a great time right now. Everything that we work on is moving.
Joy,
Go ahead.
Before you have to go, may I ask a question or two to kind of tap? You're giving us such great on the ground reporting there from, and you've mentioned, of course, this was passed in the Senate, needs to go to the House. Is it your understanding that it's just going to go straight through, or will there be opportunities for changes? And I don't know, is that a positive or a negative from your perspective?
Well, look, we have areas that we would certainly, if amendments are made, and we'll have things that we'd love to tinker with and improve. I think everyone though is, and you can expect that a whole other body of people who are also leading on this issue might want to have some small changes to the bill. There have been conversations on both sides. I really don't know the definitive answer, but here's what I do know. There will be an interest in making sure that whatever small changes are made does not disrupt the bipartisan agreement, right? Because then all this would be for naught. And of course, this is why it was important for the reconciliation package as well, because Ms. Pelosi had been very clear that we were not going to go bipartisan without the reconciliation package. So I think that being out there has shored up the bipartisan plan a little more. That's my take.
Okay, and I just also want to ask you about, we've talked about the connectivity. It's called the affordable connectivity program,
Right.
the new name for the emergency broadband benefit. But what about the Digital
We'll have to
Equity
create
Act?
we'll have to create an acronym.
But as to the Digital Equity Act itself, right? And we need to kind of take a moment to, note Senator Patty Murray of Washington, who has been pushing for this for 3 years or more, 4 years. Can you just speak to what that will do, that portion, and that up to 3 billion that you've mentioned? What are some of the key things that will come from that you're great, positive, feeling good about?
Well, one of the things we're really positive about that is the possibility of having some digital navigator programs. Right. And so I'm so sorry, my phone is starting to wane. Having some digital navigator work, and hopefully Sunne can weigh in a little more on the bill. But I think that is the piece that we raised in our Latimer plan, and also creating local plans for equity and affirmatively requiring that. I think it's just really essential. All of this cannot happen at the federal level. That we need investments that are aimed at the local level, that know their community, and that also engage with local organizations like your urban leagues, like so many others, right? Who can go into a trusted voices in communities and can go in those communities and try to make sure that they know how to get online. So those are all the things that we think are really important. And they're built in that bill that also were in our Latimer plan. We're super excited about it.
Well, we don't want to keep you beyond your 30 minutes, Joy. Do you have any final comments for us that we should take and chew on as we continue for the next 30 minutes here?
Yeah, let me just say that this is really a beginning. This is a generational investment time for our nation, and it's overdue, so it's not too much. And I think that what you'll begin hearing the National Urban League continue to talk about is we're not done. And this is not like, well, we've gotten these things and we're going to stop now and see. No, there's a lot more work to be done. I think that what we're going to find when we look at the adoption rates for EBB and despite our best efforts, we want to make sure that people are actually signing up, that we're not just making it more affordable for those who are already tangentially online. We want to make sure we are adding people who were not online before. We want to make sure that we are doing, as you say, Drew, improving lives. So you're going to see us continue to push on this. One of the things that you might, see is some additional funds. I have to see if it actually made it in reconciliation, because I know that Senator Schumer was pushing for it. Some actual money. Arguably, there is money for it, but some actual money set aside for making sure there's advertisement of this new plan, so that people can actually get it out. In the bipartisan bill, there is a mandate, right, that you do, that the companies as well as the FCC and that they do outreach, but making sure that it's fully funded, and there is some money for it that can be used, and we understand it that way, but making sure that there's there, because the ability for us to continue having this program is predicated on people actually using it. And they're only going to use it if they know about it. So just as we're doing in the child tax credit and so many other things, we've got to let people know about these resources. So you're going to hear the National Urban League talking a lot about that. You're going to hear us talking about other ways to close the digital divide. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much, Joy. And we'll talk later about all these topics, and have a safe flight. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joy.
Bye.
Bye.
So Sunne, thank you again for what you've done. Let's take a step back, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the origin of this Digital Equity Bill of Rights, and how you see the Digital Equity Act that's now been passed, at least on the Senate side, as part of the infrastructure plan, how you see that addressing or not fully addressing, whichever, the 10 points in your Digital Equity Bill of Rights.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Drew. I think Joy did a great job of providing all of the rationale for why we went so fiercely after this concept of the Digital Equity Bill of Rights as a call to action to support what was happening at the federal level and being debated, and also in our own state, California, and across the nation and other states. I think it's also worth noting that you talked about Patty Murray's effort, that Joy referenced Blair. This is a moment to thank all of the digital champions who have been, trailblazing for years, who have been the wise voices, and finally there is a tipping point in the nation. As we just also said, there is a need for continuing work to make sure the dollars that have been approved, that will, we think, be approved also by the House and signed into law by the president, what we have in California, actually have the maximum impact. And if we don't have both the infrastructure that we refer to as deployment in our world of closing the digital divide, and the use of the technology, if you will, on the demand side, which we call adoption, we won't get to the most digitally disadvantaged folks. So we had, as I referenced earlier, this concept was actually raised by one of our CPUC commissioners, Martha Guzman-Aceves. We thought it made a lot of sense. We also noted that as we have long called digital access a 21st century civil right, that it would be appropriate to have, as in the Constitution's Bill of Rights, 10 planks, 10 points in the Digital Equity Bill of Rights that includes the ubiquitous access at a sufficient speed, the ability to be able to connect from home for everyone, to use it in education and in healthcare, in commerce, in job training, that is part of education, healthcare, and our research institutions. And lastly, that it also empowers people to participate in the democracy. Today, you can't get an agenda for the city council meeting or the county board of supervisors or your legislature except online. When in California, our power companies do a public safety power shutoff, they send all of their customers to a website to find out what they're supposed to do. Alerts for wildfires are online. And when in California, a very big state of almost 40 million people, 13 million households, when 15% of our population, 6 million people, are digitally disadvantaged, that is a shame. That is an indictment of our failure to provide equity to everyone. So the Digital Equity Bill of Rights was a way of having a large tent, a big umbrella, if you want, to bring together common viewpoints that Mignon Clyburn and Rochelle Chong share, that the National Urban League with the Council on Competitiveness shares, that the internet service providers and those of us who have been advocates in the community for years, we share that. That's what the Digital Equity Bill of Rights has been. I might also add, Drew, let's just talk about the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, and now its successor that will follow on, the Affordable Connectivity Program. We kudos to all of you and the Urban League for making sure there was a follow-on program in the bill that just passed. We have long said there is the need to reach out into communities with that trusted messenger, an honest broker, do that outreach in language and in culture. Not many internet service providers are trusted by the community that's not online. The community that's not online doesn't trust a whole lot of government. So there has to be what Joy called the digital navigators that are part of this implementation. They are the National Urban League chapters throughout the country. They are those organizations that have been doing the digital literacy training for years. For the California Emerging Technology Fund, as I said, led by Susan Walters, our senior VP, and the rest of our team, over the last decade plus, we have worked with a network of more than 150 community-based organizations in California. Together, they and we have been able to deliver digital literacy training to almost 1 million people. We've also worked with those same trusted messengers, CBOs, to get about 500,000 households actually online, connected, to tell them why, as John Horrigan says, the 3 issues that you have to overcome: cost, digital literacy, and relevance, why it is important to their lives, how they save time and money to get online. That happens not if you just announce a program and sign into law, even a lot of funding. It requires people in the communities, in the trenches, making the connection with those who have to be really connected with or talked to understand the value proposition. The EBB program is $3.2 billion. That's a lot of money to this farm girl. But California and the nation's a big damn state. As of Monday, only 4.4 million households across the nation had signed up for EBB. It was less than 600,000 households in California. And in California, we have 2 million households that are digitally disadvantaged. So we are nowhere near reaching everyone we have to reach, even with the great actions of our legislators, the leadership and vision of the president, what our governor has done in California, what our legislature is doing. It's going to take, as Joy said, outreach in language and in culture, and then advertising. Not one internet service provider has increased their advertising about the availability of EBB since it became available for people to sign up on May 12th. We are hoping to join forces with internet service providers soon to expand advertising. We know it works. We do as much as we can as a very small nonprofit organization in terms of our size. And every time we put an ad on the television, mostly not in English, we reach out in different languages. Our call center and our interactive voice response lines just light up. It's immediate. It's immediate. You're on mute now, Drew.
Boy, it happens to all of us. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. I wanted to take a moment to actually pull up the Digital Equity Bill of Rights. I have put the link in there, and we got a question there. Actually, let's ask the question first, and then we'll come to my question. Who is the staff at CETF to contact for digital literacy training for service providers to people with disabilities in Southern California?
Thank you so much. I think it was Esther who asked that question, as I saw it flash on the screen.
Yeah, Rachel Estur.
Okay, Rachel. Just do go to the California Emerging Technology Fund CETF website. You can even go to info. The person who will actually end up responding immediately is Susan Walters, but we work with, for example, the California Foundation of Independent Living Centers. We work with the World Institute on Disability. They have many affiliates and other organizations under their umbrellas that can be made available, particularly in Southern California. And of course, we also work with the city and county services for those for people with disabilities. But first start for anyone to our website. You can even use just the info at CETF, and we will get back to you.
All right. So I wanted to jump into you've got 10 points, obviously mirroring the Bill of Rights. And I'd like to just focus first for a moment on the first 3, broadband that is sufficient and reliable, broadband that is ubiquitous, and broadband that is affordable. And as I was reading through this, Sunny, came to my mind, years ago when we started our effort, Broadband Breakfast sister company, Broadband Census, we were all about finding out where broadband is and how it's available. And we had a little bit of an acronym, so we call it the Broadband Spark, for speeds, prices, availability, reliability, and competition, and trying to measure the speeds, the prices, the availability, et cetera, of broadband. And so that occurred to me as I was reading this, because when you talk about speeds must be sufficient to meet the growing demand and reliance for access to education, government, public safety, economic prosperity, and healthcare, and you talk about the determination of these speeds, performance-based to support distance learning, telehealth, remote work, with a lot of households online simultaneously, and with increasing need for symmetrical network speeds. Could you just speak to this issue here of speed and capacity of broadband, Sunny? And so when we're talking about making sure people have access, are not left out, what are you thinking, Sunny? What is in your mind about what is sufficient and reliable?
Thank you, Drew. And of course, I always learn something when you share your experiences. So Spark was visionary. It was right on. We always try to figure out clever ways to communicate very complex and interrelated issues. But I do appreciate what you said, the speed, reliability, affordability, competition, all of that is excellent. I do want to say, going back to what is sufficient speed, CETF from our very inception has said that the definition of adequate high-speed internet access has to be performance-driven by the customer experience. When the FCC did their national broadband plan under Chairman Janachowski, we weighed in 2007 and 8 and said, make the speed that is sufficient dynamic. At any point in time, we can say, based on the data, based on what we observe, it is at least this much. So the federal government, the state has now said 100 down and 20 up. However, what we find is, regardless of whether or not it's wireline or wireless, what one might need at home, being online, is a function of where you are sitting, where you are with respect to the signal being transmitted on wireless, or how many people are on the loop of wireline. And remember, every wireless communication ultimately is a wireline backhaul. And so we've got to have fiber throughout the nation with diversity of end use technologies. And then maybe there are 3 or 4 students at home, children trying to do remote learning. Maybe more than one resident in the house is trying to talk to their physician. It turns out in those kinds of settings, not only download matters, it's upload that matters, because you need two-way communication with the sense of actually being engaged almost in person with someone. And so over time, the amount of bandwidth that is needed has grown exponentially. For a long time, it was driven by how many people wanted to download movies and do streaming. It's now been further defined by distance learning and telehealth. And so we have said, as a matter of policy, that's what the policymakers, that's what the regulators need to say. Whatever we're going to deploy and invest in has to, at any point in time and then going forward, not only be future-proof with respect to robust fiber middle mile networks, but also have, as a requirement of those last mile or end mile end user providers, be able to support these functions.
Okay. Now, when you talk in points 2 and 3 about broadband that is ubiquitous, and speaking about everywhere, including rural, tribal lands, populated areas, all low-income neighborhoods, and public broadband investments prioritized to connect entire communities and address digital redlining. And also the next point 3, broadband that is affordable. Where does the rubber meet the road, right? I mean, these are nice concepts, but what does this mean? Does it mean like we need to have 100 megabit symmetrical everywhere? And or I mean, you did talk about an evolving standard, right? So I guess what I'm trying to get at, Sunne, is what would you like to be the end result of the Digital Equity Bill of Rights in terms of actual broadband speeds and performance and prices in these in all parts of the country?
We hope that the Digital Equity Bill of Rights will be a conscience for policymakers and regulators, federal and state, for all of the states and territories, that when they're taking the dollars, using the dollars that have been appropriated, public dollars, and I call, by the way, public dollars being either taxpayer dollars or ratepayer dollars. In California, as an example, we have the California Advanced Services Fund. All of us with telephones pay into the California Advanced Services Fund to support broadband. Those of us who have landlines pay a lot more than those of us who have our mobile phones. We think there should be a broadened base of contribution to both CETF and the Universal Services Fund that the FCC administers. But what we would like is the following. There needs to be a true strategic thinking about the use of any public dollars. The most economical is actually to understand the imperative for ubiquitous broadband. Broadband is not only an infrastructure in and of itself to deliver internet connectivity, it now supports and regulates all other infrastructure. So as we're making investments in our transportation system, I was the Secretary of Transportation for the state of California a while back, and I used to say the best trip is a virtual trip. Anytime I can unload a trip from the network, not only have I relieved congestion, but I have reduced impacts on the environment. Broadband is a green strategy. We have a new call from the United Nations this week that sounds probably the loudest, the alarms, as a threat to humanity from global warming and climate change. We need to be able to regulate our transportation systems, our energy grid, our water systems, all depend these days on the internet. That's why it needs to be ubiquitous, as well as being able to reach every corner, every person. And for public safety, in every state, there is some kind of threat from natural disasters. We are experiencing the worst wildfires again this year. Every season we think it can't get worse, and then it does in California, and that's coupled with a drought. And so the ubiquitous nature of broadband that we speak to in our Digital Equity Bill of Rights is literally public safety. It is public safety first and foremost. And so now let me just elaborate. What does this mean in terms of those who are going to allocate dollars? It means, please look at, you drive to the farthest and hardest to reach. That is the most rural remote. That is the highest urban poverty neighborhoods. And working in tandem with the private sector, with the internet service providers, ask them to step up. If they won't step up, tell them to step aside, and they have no more legal recourse to challenge those that will step up, to challenge the public sector doing the construction if necessary. And at that time, when you then go to the farthest points and reach those that are hardest to reach today, now along that path of deployment, connect everybody else, connect the anchor institutions as well. That is what the schools, health, library coalition that John Windhauser runs would say, and that Rochelle Chong chairs. It is to and through those anchor institutions these days. Upgrade all the neighborhoods along that path of deployment. That is the most economical way to build our infrastructure for internet. It is also the way to get the highest return because you then build at scale. Now, in terms of speed and cost, as I already said, speed needs to be anybody that we're providing a public dollar to, and there's going to be 65 billion plus from the federal government. There's more that was appropriated earlier in CARES and in the American Recovery or Rescue Plan. There's 6 billion in California. Anybody taking part in that money has to have open access when they're building middle mile. Middle mile has to be fiber. That's policy to drive higher return on investments. Anybody receiving dollars, I think, should have to provide an affordable offer, not just get the subsidies from either EBB or the Affordable Connectivity Plan. The California Emerging Technology Fund has long said that procurement by the federal government, procurement by the state of California, or any public agency receiving dollars from the state of California, such as our 1,700 school districts, anybody that is then providing or contracting for a internet service through the vendor approach, which we call the procurement strategy, that internet service provider who is a vendor should have to have an affordable offer and also advertise and also work with CBOs to do the outreach to get everyone online. That is how you do not only ubiquitous broadband, but broadband that is at adequate speeds and broadband that is affordable.
Well, no, thank you for that. I have another question on the Bill of Rights, but we do have one from Amalia Deloney, who says, I am curious to know who helped author the Digital Equity Bill of Rights. Specifically, was greenlining or TURN part of this? Do you want to take that, Sunny?
Both greenlining and TURN provide a lot of input to the California Public Utilities Commission. So I'm pretty sure that the commission and Commissioner Guzman-Aceves probably had input. She had 6 items in her proposed Bill of Rights. We took that and had input from a lot of our partners who are CBOs, our own board of directors refined it. And then we vetted it with our partners, many of the regional consortia in California. We came up with a version that we all could sign on to. We would certainly welcome, and I want to underscore this, Mark Tony and TURN and Debbie Gorman and Greenlining signing on to the Digital Equity Bill of Rights. We think that having the power of Greenlining and TURN would be extraordinarily helpful.
Of course, the last 7, we've talked a bit about the first 3, broadband that's efficient, reliable, ubiquitous, affordable being the first 3. The last 7 talk almost about those impacts or national purposes that I raised earlier. And you've got here supporting educational opportunities and digital skills proficiency, ensures public safety, improves quality of life. Which goes to kind of access to educational opportunities, job opportunities, healthcare. Point 7, supporting economic prosperity. Point 8, capital investment. Point 9, innovation and research. And 10, very, very important, empowers and enables participation in the democracy. So the civic engagement, the way so much of what our government services are going online. So that's just underscoring why broadband is important. What would you add about these other points in the Bill of Rights? And I'm going to ask my next question too, Sunny, so you can tackle this one too. Now that the Digital Equity Act has passed the Senate as part of the infrastructure bill, and presuming that it gets passed in the House, what's the next struggle, right? What happens next? And you sort of said a little bit about this, but could you just speak to what we're going to do? What's the next big threshold that we can do collectively or individually in our various capacities to make sure we move forward on digital equity?
Thank you so much, Drew. The reason that we call out education and we call out healthcare, quality of life, each of those opportunities, jobs, research, is that going back to what we have learned over the last 14 years is exactly what it takes to overcome the 3 barriers to low-income households, digitally disadvantaged households getting online. And we actually use Dr. Horrigan's research where it is first cost, and cost is not only the cost of service, but the cost of a device. It is second, relevance. Why do I need it if I'm going to prioritize spending 5, 10, 15 more dollars a month out of my grocery money? And the third is digital literacy. No one is going to sign up for internet service if they don't have a device to connect to it until Google gives us a chip that we can have in our finger that we either hold in the air or stick in a socket. We actually have to have a device to connect to the internet. And I'm not going to do all of that if I don't know how to use the device. So I need digital literacy, right? And then so it takes those three things. The relevance comes when you know how to use it for education, when you know how to find on the internet a application for a job, when you know how to take a course to improve your job skills, when I can talk to my doctor without having to go in person, if it's literally something that can be handled that way. It is, even for the research institutions, very interesting that while they first needed very high internet speeds among and connections among themselves in order to collaborate, it takes a lot of computing power to run algorithms by multiple institutions. What they are also finding is the most powerful research comes from when you have real-time online participation by people, where you can easily access the experience at the moment of the population that may be participating in a vaccine trial, that may be looking to take a new course in terms of how to learn how to use the internet. And it's that ubiquitous deployment, the ability to have actual people immediately giving feedback and in real time looking at the impacts of certain things, that gives research even more power. So that's why we also talk about the research institutions needing ubiquitous broadband, not just high-speed connectivity among themselves. What does that mean? It means if the president is serious in Congress about digital equity, they order the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health and Human Services fully integrated into everything that you are doing. That means get digital navigators, get people who are in language and culture doing the outreach. I have this great hope that with talking to Joy today, the leadership of Urban League, that Mark Morial is going to convene with a Congress member Clyburn and a few other luminaries, Blair, Levin, etc. You, and we have all the internet service providers sitting in one room, and they're asked to step up so that they can get a higher return on their capital investment, their private investment, by getting everybody online. Let's get them to advertise EBB, the Affordable Connectivity Program. Let's get them to partner with the CBOs on the ground. We can get not only the digital divide closed, we can achieve digital equity in our lifetime.
Well, it is a very exciting time in broadband, not only because of the federal programs, but because of the increasing recognition of its importance, the way we need to get people online with the skills necessary. But I keep coming back in my mind to, you know, the push for rural electrification in this country, right? We didn't settle for like, okay, we're going to get broadband to, 95% or 97%. We really need to make sure we have high capacity broadband for everyone, and make sure that there are those opportunities to improve their lives as a result of it. Sunne, it's been such a pleasure to spend this hour with you, to also have had with us for a short period, half of our time, with Joy Cheney, the Senior Vice President of the National Urban League. Sunne McPeak, of course, is the President and CEO of the California Emerging Technology Fund, and leading voice in this Digital Equity Bill of Rights. For each of them, and for we thank all of you for being with us today. Join us next week for the third and final installation of the preparations for the Digital Infrastructure Investment and Broadband Communities Summit in Houston, Texas, from September 27th through September 30th. And the week following, on August 25th, we'll be talking about the Biden administration's cybersecurity executive order. So see you next week. Take care and see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.